The third Little Nightmares did not have a smooth path to release. From early starts that never made it to full builds, to pacing and design problems that forced complete restarts, this game went through multiple failed versions before the one that finally launched. Today, you're going to hear the real history behind those failures and what that means for the game you can play right now. The first Little Nightmares came out in 2017 and quickly became a standout horror puzzle game because of how it used atmosphere and environment. You played as a character named Six, trying to survive in grotesque, oversized locations filled with dangers you couldn't fight. The second game released in 2021, this time starring a new character named Mono, accompanied at times by Six. It expanded the world and deepened the mysteries, but kept the core formula of sneaking, hiding, and solving environmental puzzles without combat. After the second game, the original developer, Tarsier Studios, announced they would not be working on the next game. That meant a major change. The team that built the first two games was no longer making the third. The rights to the franchise stayed with the publisher, Bandai Namco Entertainment, which meant the next developer had to continue the series without the original creators. The very first attempt to build Little Nightmares 3 started soon after the second game's release. Early concept work and prototype footage showed a much larger world with multiple hub areas. Problems emerged early. When testers played sections of this build, many parts lacked challenge and tension. Large, open areas felt empty. Enemy encounters weren't scary but predictable. What made the earlier games effective was the sense of vulnerability and constant danger, and this build didn't deliver that feeling consistently. Because of that, this first version was not completed, and the developers chose to scrap it entirely rather than keep building on a foundation that wasn't working. After that version was abandoned, development restarted with a new design focus. Game designers tried something different in the second major build. This time, they introduced basic combat mechanics. Players tested versions where the protagonist could use simple tools to hit or fend off small enemies. But this introduced new issues. The horror in the first two games came from the fact that you could not fight. Every enemy was a threat because you were vulnerable. Introducing combat broke that core feeling. Instead of hiding, players were swinging or timing attacks, and that shifted the pacing from quiet tension to mechanical action. Playtesters said these combat encounters slowed the game down, broke the atmosphere, and didn't feel like Little Nightmares. That version was also scrapped. With two failed iterations behind them, the developers started a third complete redesign. This version reinstated the focus on atmosphere and puzzles, removing combat entirely. The new version also introduced cooperative play, allowing two players to work together through the levels, or a single player with an AI companion. The co-op idea was intended to make exploration more dynamic, but it created new challenges. Cooperative puzzles often slowed the game's pace because players had to wait for one another or coordinate actions in ways that reduced tension instead of increasing fear. Scares in horror games are usually driven by isolation and feeling unequipped. When two players could split tasks, some moments lost the sharp edge of anxiety that defined the earlier games. Despite those issues, this third version became the one that reached release. Little Nightmares 3 launched on October 10th, 2025, with two new protagonists named Lo and Alone. Lo carries a bow and Alone carries a wrench, and together they navigate environments that are connected but larger in scale than the previous installments. The world they explore is called the Spiral, made up of places like a necropolis with massive creatures, a factory filled with unsettling workers, and a carnival where danger comes from traps and twisted attractions. When the released version was revealed and reviewed, players noticed differences from the first two games. Some scenes had the atmospheric terror that fans expected, but other sections felt more like straightforward puzzle rooms rather than immersive, tense encounters. The cooperative mechanics worked well for some players when both participants communicated closely, but others felt the online play interrupted pacing. Some puzzles became puzzles of coordination rather than puzzles of discovery and fear. The final game also had technical updates and patches after release to improve performance and online stability. These were confirmed by official patch notes from the developers after launch. The team continued to refine the experience based on player feedback, which is standard for modern releases. So when people talk about how Little Nightmares 3 had a troubled development, they aren't talking about drama for drama's sake. They are talking about clear, repeated design failures that forced the project to restart at least twice before the version that shipped. The first version lacked tension and atmosphere. The second version tried combat and lost the core feel of the series. And even the version that made it to release had to adjust how cooperative play affected pacing and horror. In contrast, the first two games focused on a single character in a solitary world of danger and mystery. The puzzles were built so that players had to observe subtle clues, think ahead, and feel genuinely uneasy about what might be around the next corner. The third game still has environment design and creepy locations, but its cooperative structure and larger level design sometimes change the type of fear you feel. Instead of a constant sense of vulnerability, there are stretches where the experience feels more like puzzle exploration and less like being hunted. Little Nightmares 3 is part of the same franchise and continues to expand its universe, but it got there only after significant redesigns and resets. It is the version that survived development, not the first ideas that developers explored. Those early versions were closed because they didn't work the way the creators or the community expected. Now that you know the full development history, the failures that were real, and how they shaped the game that exists today, here is the question for you. Do you think the final version of Little Nightmares 3 kept the fear, the pacing, and the tension fans wanted? Or do you think the changes and cooperative elements weakened the core experience? Leave your thoughts in the comments.